Hello, critics, non-critics, and friends. Welcome to the Film Optix podcast, where we take a glance into blockbusters, indie films, and everything in between. I'm your host, Christian, and as always, I'm joined by my partner in film, Devin, and today we're here to present our review, our coverage of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. And before we begin today's episode, you can, of course, listen to our podcast on podcast platforms around the internet. That includes Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. And if you are a new or seasoned listener to our show, we would love to hear from you guys. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at Film Optix. That is Optix with an X. Or you can email us at filmoptix@gmail.com for any movie-related questions. Devin, Devin, who are you going to call?
Bustin' makes me feel good.
Bustin'
It's true.
makes me feel good.
There's no denying that.
I can't believe they actually put that line in the movie. That was hilarious. But
I mean, it's in the song, so might as well.
oh, that's right. Gosh, it's been a while since I've listened to the song. I usually listen more to the instrumental. It's such a banger of a tune. And I think, to me at least, that's probably the best part of Ghostbusters altogether. I'm not like a big Ghostbusters fan, but it's more... I love the music. I love that theme song. It truly is a banger. But how have you been? How's your weekend been? You been watching anything, playing anything? You just been chilling? What's been going on? You been watching some March Madness?
Yeah, I've been kind of diving into the March Madness action. It helps when you are able to place some wagers on it to make these games interesting. So that's what I've been doing, and it definitely makes it a lot more entertaining.
Yeah, I can't say that I have been lost in the sauce when it comes to the March Madness. I'm just not, Devin knows this, I'm just not much of a basketball fan. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, the one time, well, the two times I was like really into basketball is, of course, when the Cavs won a 2016 championship, and a little bit after when my alma mater, Kent State University, actually got into March Madness, and we lost within the first round against UCLA. So those are the two times that I was a heavily invested basketball fan, or quote unquote fan, more of an admirer from afar. But yeah, I haven't really been, I'm just not into basketball as much as other people. Of course, a lot of people, down here in good old Music City, everyone's been cheering on their favorite teams, and I like the atmosphere. I like the atmosphere of going to a game and watching it with people, but me, myself, I'm not heavily invested into it. But I love the atmosphere of sports just in general. Like, it doesn't really matter. This is like, one of the biggest tournaments that happens every year. So yeah, you pulling for anyone to win? What's your bracket looking like?
I think I picked UConn to win. That's like the most popular pick.
Not going with OU, I see. Interesting.
Well, if they were in it, maybe, but the MAC the MAC did not represent us very well this year. Akron lost the first round.
Gotcha. See, that's how little I know about what's going on for March Madness. But I guess this is how everyone else feels when football season happens, because it's like when football season happens, me and the boys here, we're all like, it's like every week. And the people who don't watch football are like, kind of like, well, yeah, I don't watch football. But that's how I feel during like basketball season. Heck, even hockey season or even baseball. It's just not for me. I'll go to a baseball game. I'll go. I've been to a few Pirates games, been to a few now Guardians games. But yeah, I just can never really get into those sports for whatever reason. Same thing with soccer, but going to a soccer game is a lot of fun. We have a soccer club here in Nashville, so that's always a good thing. So as I mentioned at the top of this episode, we are going to be giving our spoiler-free thoughts on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I'm not sure how much of a Ghostbusters fan Devin is compared to me, but I'm assuming not a lot. I really don't know, because we covered Ghostbusters Afterlife, and from what I remember from that episode, and I'll link that episode in the episode notes of this show or this recording, I remember us liking it quite a bit because it was more of like a revitalization of the franchise. But before I get ahead of myself, we'll be right back after this introduction to Ghostbusters Frozen Empire.
For the first time in New York history, a room full of people froze to death in July.
It's an unimaginable evil with the power to kill by fear itself.
Like, literally scared to death?
Now it's headed straight for us.
Is something trying to get out?
Many things.
It's commanding an army of the undead.
I think we're all going to die.
Hold on to your ass!
This could bring about the end of humankind.
And we are back with our spoiler-free review, our spoiler-free coverage of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. This film is directed by Gil Kenan, and writers include Gil Kenan, Jason Reitman, and Ivan Reitman, just to name a few of the writers attached to this project, and stars Paul Rudd, Carrie Coon, Finn Wolfhard, McKenna Grace, and of course, the 3 out of the 4 original Ghostbusters. And the story is as follows. When the discovery of an ancient artifact unleashes an evil force, Ghostbusters, new and old, must join forces to protect their home and save the world from a second Ice Age. So as I mentioned before, we're going to be getting straight into our review here. This is spoiler free, so you don't have to worry about any spoilers. I know there's a lot of Ghostbusters fans out there. They were packing up my theater left and right. So Devin, I'm going to pass it over to you. What are your initial reactions, your thoughts on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire?
Yeah, going into this one, I'd agree with you. I'm not really like a huge Ghostbusters fan. Obviously, the original that came out back in the 80s is definitely a hit for a reason. And I don't think I ever saw Ghostbusters 2, to be honest. And then that 2016 one was pretty rough. I know it got a lot of hate for different reasons, but just not great. And then Afterlife came out 2021, and I definitely do remember us enjoying that one quite a bit because, like you said, it was a nice revitalization with some new fresh characters that got brought in and kind of carried the story in their own way. And then we have this one where it's more so kind of a rehash of the original Ghostbusters movie, where you get 3 of the 4 Ghostbusters and you bring them back as major characters into the fold instead of like the minor like cameos they had in the original, or not the original, but Afterlife. And I think that kind of works against this movie to a degree, as much as it does help it, because obviously there are a lot of fans out there who want to see these original Ghostbusters back in action, but I do like the direction they went with in Afterlife, where we have these new characters taking over and kind of taking the reins. And I think they kind of stepped back a little bit from that and went in a different direction. I think that's what people are complaining about the most, is that it's just really a lot of nostalgia bait, and there's just too much of that in this movie, which I can see. But that doesn't mean it's total failure. I definitely think there's a lot to like here. I've seen some people compare it to Madam Web, and it's just like, it's not even like the same hemisphere. Like, this movie is at least a coherent story, and that at the very least is infinitely better than Madam Web
and Argyle.
Yeah, it's like this movie is just so much better than those, and it just should not be compared. And I think this one at least has like, I think this one's a little funnier than Afterlife. It has a fair amount, bit more humor in this one. They added in Kumail Nanjiani. I loved his character. Obviously, Paul Rudd. He's always going to bring the laughs. He's just kind of always entertaining, no matter what he's doing. So I'm always there for that. And I think the main difference is this one's a bit more funny and doesn't have that kind of dramatic core at its center, like Afterlife did, where they kind of had the emotional core of the Harold Ramis character, kind of being respected in the first one, and because he had passed on, so it was kind of just showing the respect to that character, and they didn't really have that in this movie, where there wasn't that emotional core that kind of brought everything together.
So I definitely agree with you on a lot of points there. It kind of feels like this film took a few steps back from Afterlife, because my biggest thing with these franchises is that, you know, if you want these franchises, you know, the Ghostbusters, the Lord of the Rings, Star Wars of it all, you know, all of these famous franchises, even Jurassic Park, if you want these franchises to grow and evolve, you have to start letting go of legacy characters, and you have to stop relying on them to carry the film instead of the new characters that you brought in. And I think that's what Afterlife did so well, is that the legacy characters took like a back seat, not even like a back seat. They took like the third seat of like a minivan type situation. And we were introduced to these new characters.
Yeah, they just had like those minor cameos, like nothing crazy.
And I feel like if you can't make a Ghostbusters film or whatever legacy franchise out there, if you can't make a new Ghostbusters film or whatever it may be for a new audience without heavily relying on the nostalgia bit and heavily relying on the legacy characters, you shouldn't be touching this franchise at all, because it doesn't make sense to me for us to have like a fairly good movie like Afterlife, and then for them just to kind of backtrack, and it's like, oh, like, let's just throw in all this like nostalgia stuff. It's like, if I want to go like down a trip on memory lane, I'll just go watch the original Ghostbusters. That's what I would say if I was a Ghostbusters fan. Like, obviously, you know, if you're a Ghostbusters fan, you're going to see this new movie, but I wanted them to focus more just on the new characters. Like, let's have a story surrounding more so with them, and like where you don't have to put Bill Murray's face or any of the other Ghostbusters face like really near the core of the story, because I mean the other Ghostbusters are in this film quite a lot, and you get Lawrence, the ghost, of course, making an appearance, but it's like he was kind of just there. It's kind of like the member berries from South Park. And they're like, oh, member, you member? Yeah, like it's Lawrence, the ghost. I will say that when it comes to the film, when I tweeted out, originally I said it was underwhelming and that it doesn't break any new mold for the franchise, which I agree with, and it relies heavily on that nostalgia. But Paul Rudd and McKenna Grace and the writing of this Ghostbusters, the banter at least, was top notch, but the villain was horrible. I feel like they baited us into, you know, it's like this big buildup of this villain the entire movie, and then the villain shows up like within like the last 30 minutes of the movie, and it's defeated so quickly. And you're like, well, that just felt like a wasted buildup, at least for me. I'm not sure what your thoughts on that is, but overall, like, I didn't hate this movie. Like you said, it's far from like one of the worst movies. It's just, it's a Ghostbusters movie, but it just doesn't really do anything new. And I was expecting something more, especially after the events of Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. As far as the villain goes, I think I really liked the design of the villain. I thought he looked cool. It just kind of the whole, all the horns and just the big, tall, giant ice man. But yeah, like you said, he just kind of does not get much screen time and just kind of gets thrown away at the end.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, you know, without going to spoilers, it's just, you know, we hear about this villain the entire movie and how it's like essentially the second Ice Age. But I think what the core of what this movie focused on was McKenna Grace's character, and she's a bit of a wild child. Wild child with parentheses around that phrase, because she is a very obedient, daughter. She's very nerdy, very sciencey. She likes all the stuff that her grandfather was into, but she has like a bit of her own adventure. She's messing up left and right, and it's kind of putting the new Ghostbusters in jeopardy. And I feel like Finn Wolfhard was kind of just there, but when it comes to McKenna Grace's character, you know, she was like the focal point for most of it. And
I think that for me, a lot of that just felt a lot of that felt just a little off. Like a ghost romance storyline, it just didn't really work for me. And then just her getting, she got tricked over and over again.
Yeah, and I was like, you're smarter than this. Like, at least you should be.
Yeah, they did not do her any favors. And as far as who played the ghost, it was Emily Allen Lind. She was in Gossip Girl, apparently.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I know exactly who she is. I thought it was Ruby Cruz. She shares and she was in Doctor Sleep. That's where I remember her from.
Oh yeah, and she was in the Babysitter movies too.
Yeah, she was. Yes, she was. Yeah. Great movies. But I do agree when it comes to it everything was kind of just all over the place. I wasn't sure how I felt about like that ghost romance thing either. So as far as making McKenna Grace's character Phoebe Spengler, or Phoebes for short, as far as going more in depth with her sexual preference, I think that's fine. Like, it makes sense, the signs are there. She's a bit of an oddball. She doesn't necessarily fit in at school because, she does have this like intellectual level that is like leagues above those of people in her own grade. But if they're going to go down that route, that's fine. I was just like, oh, okay, so there's this whole ghost angle. That's where it kind of lost me a little bit.
It also just didn't look very good. The ghost itself just looked off. Like in Afterlife, the ghost of her grandfather looked like really good. Like that was well done.
Yeah.
Especially since he's no longer with us, they were able to kind of piece that together.
Right. Yeah, and I thought that was pretty awesome. Like, I mean, if you look back at Ghostbusters Afterlife, and this is just going off the Rotten Tomatoes score, and again, scores don't necessarily measure someone's enjoyment. It's just like, okay, so for Ghostbusters Afterlife, it's showing a 64% on the critic side. That means 64% of critics enjoyed the movie. For the audience score, 94. So I forgot what we had given it, but I remember us both enjoying it. For Ghostbusters Afterlife, it's at a 43% on the critic side and at 84% on the audience side. And I just want to clarify, numbers do not matter. Film is totally subjective, and if you like this movie, that's fine. And if you didn't like this movie, that's cool too. Like, there was just a lot of people online, a lot of noise on Twitter where there was this one random tweet where it was like a Ghostbusters fan encouraging people to give Frozen Empire a higher rating than critics because, like, screw the critics. It's like, well, critics are just giving their opinion like everybody else out there. I mean, I don't think
it makes sense for this one to have the high audience score because of how they brought all the original crew back. Like, of course, that's going to be serving the fans for the most part, and there definitely are a lot of Ghostbusters fans out there.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah. There's a ton of Ghostbuster fan out there.
At my theater, there were actually like a lot of people dressed up like in the Ghostbuster suits, just walking around. I thought it was pretty cool.
Same here, honestly. Yeah, I was gonna say like our entire screening, like it was through Allied, but there were people pulling up in like Ghostbuster cars, like they had the siren and everything. Like
that's impressive.
Yeah, it was crazy. One of the critics I went with, his name is Dominic. He works over at Geek Vibes Nation. He lives by like one of like the families who are like they're big into Ghostbusters, man. Like, and there's only been a few movies. This is like what, the 5th in the entire franchise? I think there was a TV show, wasn't there?
Yeah, there were movies, and there was a cartoon in the 90s, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, man, like only 5 movies, it has a massive following, and I totally understand. I think fans of Ghostbusters are going to love this movie because it does heavily focus on nostalgia, and there's nothing wrong with that because we all love a bit of dose of nostalgia here or there. Heck, X-Men 97 is massive with that, but with that, it's taking the story in a different direction. This just feels it feels just like your standard ghost busting adventure. Like, it doesn't really push the narrative forward for when Afterlife came out. And I gotta say, I was sorely missing podcast, like the character podcast. He's in this movie, but he wasn't as...
Yeah, he has his moments, but not as much as the first.
Yeah, like Afterlife, he was on it, man. And like, he was actually like, recording and stuff. And I remember us both gushing about that. And then, yeah, it kind of just fell to the wayside. I was going to ask you really quick.
Finn Wolfhard's character also takes a big step back in the second one, as far as just like screen time and doing anything.
But who does not, outside of Paul Rudd and Carrie Coon, because I think they're both fantastic.
I think Paul Rudd had a bit of a step back in this one too.
Yeah.
It seemed like he was in it less because they like the classic, like the group splits up in the middle and they're doing their own things.
Yeah. The breakup of, yeah. But how did you feel about Kumail Nanjiani's character being in this movie?
Yeah, I think he was definitely a welcomed addition, and his character's background was interesting, a bit random, but kind of convenient, but pretty funny.
Yeah, there were parts where he's the chosen one of redacted stuff, but it felt like he was just a firebender who like kind of he came into the mix
basically. Yeah,
but I feel like, and I hope this doesn't happen because I love Kumail Nanjiani. It felt like he was just playing himself, much like Ryan Reynolds. Like, that's like the biggest criticism of Ryan Reynolds is that ever since Deadpool, he's kind of just playing Deadpool or like playing himself in like every single movie. So it's like he's so attached to that. I love Kumail Nanjiani because we've reviewed, what was it, Lovebirds? I think they came out on Netflix with him and Issa Rae. And it's like, yeah, like that was a fun adventure. But and of course he was also in Eternals, as well as others like The Big Sick, things of that nature. But I couldn't help but notice, like, I felt like he was just kind of playing himself. I was like, okay, like, hey, like, just be funny. And that's fine. I think that works for some movies, and it definitely works here. I just don't want that to continue. Like, if he appears in like another Ghostbusters movie, like, not saying he has to be like a super serious character, but let's I want to see more range from him, I guess, if that makes any sense. But I mean, I think he did a great job in this movie. Like, he fit right in, like we said, with the writing and whatnot. I thought it was fantastic. But I'm going to pass it back over to you because I've been talking here forever. Were there any other irks or compliments you wanted to give this movie before we go into our final thoughts and ratings?
Yeah, I think the one main thing these two new movies have done well is they've done a good job of mixing the practical with the special effects, with the designs of the different ghosts and whatnot. Like the Slimer ghost that appears in this movie, it looks like they pulled it right from the original. Like, they did a good job of making it look like the practical effects that it was in the original. But they do a good job of mixing the two styles into what it looks like on the screen. They did a breakdown of that on Corridor Digital a couple of years ago, I think, when Afterlife came out, just showing that they're able to kind of mix the two into making visuals that look pretty good on the screen, and doing a good job of that.
I agree. I did like the mix of practical and VFX altogether, and we've talked about this on numerous occasions where we think that is probably the best way to go, because if you're able to highlight and focus in on what makes each effects at their peak, you're able to pump out a really good movie. But yeah, it's crazy because I was actually looking up a little bit of trivia before we get into our final thoughts and ratings. Apparently, this movie was originally was called Firehouse, after Ghostbusters Firehouse, in the previous films, where the exterior shots of the firehouse were filmed at Hook and Ladder 8 in Tribeca, which is pretty cool. It's like in a lower Manhattan area, New York City. And I thought that was pretty cool. So originally the working title was Firehouse, which is pretty cool, but I mean, it doesn't really fit in with Frozen. Well, I guess it does. If you've seen the movie, it definitely.
Yeah, they do live in the firehouse.
Yeah, and there are other fire aspects that happen here, but yeah, I agree pretty much with everything that you were saying. Like it's a fine movie. It's not terrible by any means. It's just I feel like the marketing was pushing a little bit too heavy towards certain things. There wasn't a lot of ghost busting going on, in my opinion, outside of like the beginning and the end. Because the middle, it was like, for a second there, I was like, all right, like I almost dozed off for a moment. I'm like, where is this villain? Like he's like stuck in a Pokeball the entire time. And I'm like, you guys keep building up to it. Like, let's get to it. You know, like it's supposed to be the frozen empire. And it's like, New York was frozen for like 15 minutes. But that's just.
Yeah, they definitely could have had more of that.
Yeah.
And less of the romance storyline popping up.
Yeah, that was, I mean, hey, that's how they wanted to go. That one girl from, speaking of Madam Web, we were mentioning earlier, she's also in this movie.
Yeah, she was barely in this one. Like I remember her a fair amount in the first one, but this one she was just like, yeah, because her and Finn Wolfhard's character meet in Oklahoma or wherever it was.
That's what it was.
Get their kind of romance going on.
They were like literally in the middle of nowhere in that movie, and I think that's what made it so interesting for Afterlife.
And then every character just moves to New York, apparently.
Hey, that's
Every character.
Every character, they're all moving to the Big Apple. They're like, hey, I got this new job lined up. We're going to New York City. Oh my gosh, me too. Yeah, they're all coincidentally in New York. Where
Podcast is at Space Camp in New York.
Yeah, that's a tough sell for any parent. I really wish they would have done more with him. Yeah, Celeste O'Connor, she plays Lucky. She was also in Madam Web, but yeah. She was in A Good Person. That's right. Also remember her from. It's with Florence Pugh and Morgan Freeman. If you have not seen it, Devin, listeners out there, definitely check it out. It's called A Good Person. Severely underrated film that came out last year, and I absolutely loved it. But yeah, let's get into our final thoughts and our ratings here. So, Devin, what are your final thoughts and ratings on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire?
Yeah, final thoughts here. I think this entry into the franchise, I think it takes a bit of a step back from Afterlife, which we definitely agree was a good time, and we definitely had high praise for that one. This one just like stepped back and took too much of a reliance on the nostalgia and the original characters, just relying too much on them to try to move the plot forward, and just didn't really work in their favor too much here. But I do think there's definitely some entertainment value here. There's definitely some humor. Like they definitely tick that up a little bit compared to the first one, but it just doesn't have that same emotional core that the first one did. But overall, I'd say it's a solid movie. Like nothing crazy, nothing terrible, and I think I'd probably give it like a 65 overall, like somewhere around there. Like, yeah, it's got its issues, but at the end of the day, you get a big bucket of popcorn. You sit there and watch it, and you're gonna have a good time. I don't think many people are gonna like hate this movie, but I don't understand why it's getting some of the hatred it's getting.
Yeah, I'm confused about that as well, because I've seen a few people's reactions on Twitter where they were like just way too harsh with this movie. I was like, okay, like it, you know, it's fine. It's a very whelmed experience.
It's just a popcorn movie.
Yeah,
it's like the definition of it.
Like it for me, it's like nothing ventured, nothing gained. Like they didn't really go outside of their bubble like they did with Afterlife.
Like there's no terrible ADR or story like in Madam Web. Like there's no terrible editing. Like it's just all decent.
I mean, ADR is normal,
but that extreme is not normal.
I know. Yeah, it was bad. Ooh, man, oh man. But yeah, there was like a tweet out there. They're like, oh, this is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is like one of the worst films of the decade. I was like, what? Like
it's just too
it's
far.
Like number one, it's 2024. We got 6 years left of the 2020s. It's so premature. I think people are easily just doing it for the reactions, probably spreading misinformation, which shouldn't be a thing at all. But yeah, like it was cool. And what was the score that you gave it one more time? I do apologize.
65.
65. You know what? I'll probably have to match your 65 and go down a few points lower, just to a 60 out of 100. As I said before, it's a fun time. It's just it just doesn't break that ground. Like I said before, nothing ventured, nothing gained. But I think McKenna Grace and Paul Rudd were definitely the highlights. It's funny. It's kind of like they told Finn Wolfhard, like, yeah, you're already part of one Stranger Things crew. You know, you're going to be taking a back seat for Frozen Empire.
You're taking a step back.
Yeah,
here.
you're taking a step back here. Mike, breaking Will's heart all over again. I thought that was funny. But I was like, oh yeah, so it's Finn Wolfhard starring in Stranger Things. But I mean, if you really want to look at it that way. But yeah, just a 60 out of 100. I think people should go see this movie. It is a fun time, like Devin said. Fun popcorn movie. It is full of laughs. Paul Rudd has some like the best line delivery like ever, and we didn't really touch on his like relationship.
When he said "busted makes me feel good," that was probably the best part.
Yeah, and like
the whole theater just like getting into that.
Oh yeah, my theater was howling. Well, and we didn't really talk about like the relationship between Paul Rudd's character and Carrie Coon's character when it comes to like the stepfather dynamic. I don't think that they're married as of yet. I think they're just like kind of together, but they kind of lean into that a little bit. But it doesn't. It goes somewhere, but it's just not. I wish we would have had more of that altogether. I think that would have been an interesting plot point for Frozen Empire if they would have honed in and expanded on that. But yeah, 65 out of 100 for Devin and 60 out of 100 for me. So for our overall podcast score, that comes out to around like a 62.5 is like the median. So that's going to be our official podcast score for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. And that concludes today's episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your preferred podcast platform of choice. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Film Optix. That is Optix with an X. And don't forget to share an episode of our podcast with a fellow movie lover out there, whether it be your mother, your brother, or your significant other. Spread the love for the Film Optix podcast, again, with a movie lover in need. So as far as upcoming releases, we're going to be covering movies such as Godzilla x Kong and Monkey Man. And when it comes on the TV side, we're going to be covering season 1 of X-Men 97 as well as Shogun once both of those shows have run their course throughout their premiere dates. And for new releases that you can actually listen to right now, we have abundance of them for you. You can actually listen to our X-Men 97 episodes 1 and 2 spoiler-free reaction, as well as our Dune Part 2 spoiler-free and spoiler episode all together, as well as our Invincible Season 2 Part 2 episodes 5 through 8 reviews. And with all that said, again, thank you all for listening. If you enjoy the show, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads, all the social media garbage for all that latest updates. That was Devin, and I'm Christian, signing off. And remember, life is like a movie. So go out there and make it a blockbuster.
Peace.